So when you look at difficulty levels, right, in the score tracker you have difficulties 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is definitely a 5, but there are degrees of difficulty within 5. So basically, if 60% of test takers get the question right, that pretty much makes it a difficulty 5, right? 60% or fewer. And you guess how many people get this one right?
20.
It's around 20, 30%. So of difficulty 5 questions, it's twice as hard as the rest of those, right? So it's really like a difficulty 6 or 7, but we don't need to waste our time with that degree of difficulty because there's just not that many that are up there. But in any case, let's give it a go. So one reason, by the way, what answers were we debating? A, E, D. Anything else?
B, C.
Okay. B and C for fun. All right. So one reason why European music has had such a strong influence throughout the world, one reason, and why it is a sophisticated achievement. So we're about to hear why it's had influence and why it's sophisticated, is that over time the original function of the music, whether dance, ritual, dance, or worship, gradually became an aspect of its style, not its defining force. I'm not totally sure what that means, but the next sentence does help us clarify. Dance music could stand independent of dance, for example, and sacred music independent of religious worship. Now notice, the fact that the music became detached from its original function, right, and could stand on its own, you could sing like a religious song outside of a religious ceremony, right? The fact that it did that is what made it so influential and so sophisticated. You guys cool with that? That's why, in other words, that was the cause. It became influential and sophisticated because it detached. It goes on. Dance music could stand independent because each composition had so much internal coherence that the music ultimately depends on nothing but itself. In other words, it detached and became, it had so much internal coherence. What does that mean? It all makes sense, right? Like if something is coherent, then it makes sense. So it's internally coherent. So you don't need to look to other things to explain what's going on, right? Like you don't need to look to the ritual or the dance to understand the music. The music is internally coherent. It's self-explanatory. Sound good? Now, because the music became independent, self-explanatory, coherent, that's why it's so influential and so sophisticated. You guys cool with that? Okay. So, the claims made above are compatible with each of the following except. Do you guys know what compatible means? What does it mean?
Could be true.
Could be true. Compatible just means could be true. If two claims are compatible, then that means they can both coexist at the same time. So, ants are small is compatible with the claim that microphones should be dropped. Right? Because they don't have anything to do with each other. And they're compatible because they don't contradict. If I said ants are small and then I said ants are large, you'd be like, that's not compatible. Cool? Okay, so we're looking for something that's not compatible because the claims made above are compatible with each of the following except. So, A, could it be true that African music has had a more powerful impact on the world than European music has had?
Yes.
What did they say about European music?
Had a strong influence.
It's had a strong influence. Is that relative or absolute?
Relative.
Okay, by saying relative, we're not right. It's absolute. If I say that it's had a strong influence, I'm just saying it's strong. I'm not comparing it to anything else, so it's not relative. But answer choice A is relative because it says more powerful. So even though European music has had a strong influence, something could certainly have a stronger or more powerful influence, right? So answer choice A is not incompatible with the passage. It certainly could be true. Now, if the passage had said European music has had the strongest influence throughout the world, then A would be the correct answer. Okay, so A is wrong. B, European military and economic expansionism partially explains the global influence of European music. Sure, it could explain it. What's the key word here?
Partially.
Partially, right? Because the first sentence said one reason why, not necessarily the only reason. So we know that it's influential because of this independence and coherence, but there may be other reasons as well, which is what B is saying. C, the original functions of many types of Chinese music are no longer their defining forces. Do we know anything about Chinese music? No. So this is something that certainly could be true. Like they could have just said, anyways, whatever. D, music that is unintelligible, in other words, not coherent, right? When it is presented independently of its original function, which is exactly what we're talking about, tends to be the most sophisticated music. They said that this music is sophisticated because it's independent and coherent. So to say that music that is not coherent tends to be the most sophisticated music doesn't make any sense. Like something can't be sophisticated for a particular reason, and then you say, well, when that reason doesn't exist, it actually tends to be the most sophisticated. It's like, wait, what? Like, that's going to make something sophisticated, and its absence is going to make it even more sophisticated? That's weird. So at the very least, keep this answer open. E, some works of art. Some! Are you guys doing the translating? At least one, right? Okay, at least one work of art will lose its appeal when it's presented to serve a function other than their original one. Could that be true? Could it be true that at least one actually loses its appeal? Well, we know this is true for European music, but do we know about painting? Do we know about sculpture? We don't know anything about any of that. So by saying at least one piece of art, this certainly could be true. Especially kid art, the stuff they bring home. Anyway, sorry. I have to deal with a lot of that. So D is the answer, because even if it's hard to understand, it's at least starting to deal with some of the issues in the passage and seems to be going against it. Whereas all the others, it's like, oh yeah, that could be true. And so if you can see why A, B, C, and E could be true, then you know that D is the answer.
I can't see why we can eliminate C very clearly.
Oh, you can't see why we can get rid of C.
Right.
Oh, the original functions of many types of Chinese music are no longer their defining forces. Like, this passage is about European music, so I just don't know anything about Chinese music, which means this certainly could be true. Like, sometimes with these compatibility questions, people pick answers sometimes they'll give you crazy answers like, ice cream can melt at cold temperatures. And people are like, ice cream? That is not compatible with this passage. They never talked about ice cream. But the further away it gets from the passage, the more compatible it becomes. Because it's like, well, that could be true. We just don't know anything about ice cream. And so you're really when you're looking for something that's incompatible, it has to be dealing with stuff in the passage and conflicting with it. Okay. Any other questions on 114? All right.